When it comes to manhood, a rite of passage is that defining moment that needed to include three distinct characteristics.
Let's talk about the importance of why it needs to be a father that helps them go into that. And what does that transition actually look like?
All those things you mentioned, having sex for the first time, getting married, getting your first car, getting your driver's license, having your first beer, getting drunk for the first time, doing drugs, going to your first concert. Like, all of these are just examples of what our culture and our society has attempted to replace a rite of passage with.
Single moms, how do they go about it, man? Dad's out of the picture, deadbeat dad, or maybe dad.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
All right, what's going on? Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting, a show where we focus on helping dads become better family leaders. I am your host, G. Vidal, and today I am joined by a special guest, a fellow friend, a brother of mine. He is a 14-year law enforcement veteran. He is a devoted husband who's been married for over 11 years now. He's a father of 3 growing boys, but he is also the founder of Voyage Rights, an organization seeking to make rites of passages a regular part of our culture. And we're going to dive deep into this topic today. And I want to welcome to the show, Dan Smith. What's up, brother?
What's up, G? Really appreciate you having me on. It's been an honor getting to know you over the past couple of years, and I've been following along with the podcast. It's awesome, and I can't wait to dive into this topic. It's a passion of mine. It's near and dear to my heart, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, likewise, brother, man. It's been awesome these past 2 years. For those of you that don't know, we've been on a hiatus here at Alpha Dad Consulting. We haven't done an episode for quite some time. That's not for nothing. I literally have been working along with Dan. Dan knows we've been working on a lot of stuff in the background, man. And so this year is looking very promising. We're going to bring a lot of new content, a lot of new stuff that we got strategized and ready for you guys. And this conversation is a part of that, really. So with that, man, I want to dive in. One of the things, being an Apogee, because you and I are part of the Apogee Brotherhood, right? The Apogee Man program. And one of the things we run into a lot is we see a lot of people in law enforcement, veterans, military, right? Like we come across those guys all the time. And what I see a lot is that whenever they start an entrepreneurial venture, it usually has something to do with the industry that they're in, right? Like it's like a protector. We've had like Byron Rogers on, right? And he's like executive protection, right? He's a Marine, all that. So they take all that training and everything. They try to build a business around it. But you, my friend, decided to go a completely different route, which is awesome, by the way. You know, being 14 years in law enforcement, man, but you decided to go somewhere else with it. You know, so I want to dive into 2 questions really. One is, what is a rite of passage, right? If you can define it for us so we can kind of get an understanding of it. And 2 is why, man? Like why did you decide to go on this mission, right? And like disrupt. I mean, you said you want to make this a regular part of culture. You want to disrupt culture and how it is now. So why is this mission so important to you? We can start there.
All right. So I'll start with the second question first. So, and how I sort of got to this point. And you're absolutely right. A lot of law enforcement, a lot of cops out there, when they pursue an entrepreneurial endeavor, it's going to be similar to what they're used to. They play to their strengths. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. My own twin brother is doing something similar. And there's a lot of reasons why I didn't go down that path. Through our Apogee journey, started learning about personal sovereignty and what that means for me and my family and where I wanted my family to be. And I started to realize, and I think I had known for a long time, that law enforcement wasn't what I was on fire for. Now, it was something that I wanted to do since I was a kid, and that was great. So I signed up for it. I went to criminal justice classes at my community college pretty well, got some straight A's. I was like, okay, maybe I'm cut out for this. Went to the police academy and had learned a lot about myself there, learned a lot about the world those first couple of years as a new cop. And it was really good for me at that time. I've had a lot of great experiences in law enforcement, some not so great, but I've taken away a lot of lessons learned about who I am as a man, essentially. And we'll get into this, but it's essentially my rite of passage into manhood and learning what it means to be a protector and learning the work I had to do to provide for my family. I was already a full-blown cop when I met my wife, when I got married and started having kids. So my family has known nothing different than my life in law enforcement. Now, why I started to look into something outside of law enforcement, I ended up joining a federal agency, spent some time overseas. It was during that time that I realized that I was not dedicating the time I needed to at home and being a present father. And I could really notice the distance and the almost irritability from my family. And I attributed that to the lack of me being present in the home as a father and them missing the father's presence. So I got back from that stint overseas. It was at the end of 2022. And I told myself, like, 2023, I'm not taking any long deployments. I'm going to minimize the travel as much as possible and really dedicate the year to figuring out what being a present father meant to me. So it ended up being perfect timing, divine timing even. That's when Apogee came along and they started up the online men's mentorship program. And it was perfect timing, knowing that this is what I needed to dedicate my time to and to being a better father. Along that journey, with the Apogee journey, we were tasked with defining our chief definite aim. What is the most important thing you need to accomplish by the end of the year to move the needle in the right direction?
Yeah.
And for me, I had to make that about fatherhood. I had to make that about my boys, because that was the whole reason why I jumped in on Apogee. That was the whole purpose. I had started along that path. And I had heard of the ideas of rites of passage in the past. I hadn't really given it much stock or much thought. I had heard of it from Ryan Mickler with the Order of Man. He had talked about that several times on his podcast, and I was part of the Iron Council for a short time. It just sort of kept coming back up into my mind, this idea of bringing my boys through a rite of passage. I was giving it more thought, and I thought, okay, this is something I really want for my boys. I want them to be able to experience this proper transition into manhood, something that I didn't get. I think back to my teenage years often. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But long or the short of it, I made developing a rite of passage for my boys as my chief definite aim to accomplish by the end of the year. And then as the year continued, I started figuring out, like, hey, I need more sovereignty in my life. I need more sovereignty for my family. And I started thinking about what that looked like for our future. It did not include law enforcement. It did not include working for the government. And there's a whole lot of reasons behind that. But essentially, I needed to be the sole arbiter of my income and the way I provide for my family. So I was really digging into entrepreneurship. I really wanted to come up with something or an idea or a product that I could market and achieve that sovereignty for me and my family. And then it hit me one night at the dinner table, and it just clicked, like, rites of passage. I'm already digging into that for my boys and me and my family.
Yeah.
And this is not something that is common in our culture. Somebody needs to take this on for our culture and bring this idea of a rite of passage into manhood and make it more mainstream, make it more common. I kept mulling it over in my head, but immediately, as soon as I had that realization, like, this is what I need to be doing, I felt a fire inside of me that I had never, ever felt before in my entire life. It's that moment. And I hate to use the cliche term of calling, but it's really what it was. Like, I felt this calling, felt this fire inside of me. Never felt that way about law enforcement. Not in 14 years. It was 12 years at the time, but not in my entire career have I ever felt this way. And I've had a pretty good career. But I knew that this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. So with all that being said, Voyage Rights was born essentially out of Apogee and the growth that we had achieved. And here we are today. I'm a year into the business, so to speak, getting things rolling. Really, really excited for the growth that we've achieved over the last year. This next year is going to be insane. I've got so much coming for Voyage Rights. It's going to be incredible. So that's the long sort of roundabout way of how I came to getting into the rites of passage. As far as what a rite of passage is, when it comes to manhood, a rite of passage is that defining moment that signifies that transition. So there's a really old book. It's just called Rites of Passage. It was written in the early 1900s by a French guy named Arnold van Gennep. And this guy, it was sort of the very first psychological literature on rites of passage. And he dove into all kinds of tribal initiation rituals. And he came to the conclusion that a rite of passage needed to include 3 distinct characteristics, and that's separation, initiation, and incorporation. So it begins with a separation, and that separation is separating yourself from what you previously have known, and it's putting away something that you're done with. And then
Gotcha.
you go through that transition period, that initiation period, and this is where like the ritualistic aspect, the ceremonial aspect of a rite of passage occurs.
Yeah.
And it occurs within sacred space. And then there's reincorporation. There's incorporation back into society, but as that changed individual. And as this pertains to manhood, this is putting aside your childhood, putting aside the boyhood, the boy that you once were, and looking ahead to your future as a man. And then coming out of that as a man and being reincorporated into society with additional responsibilities and expectations of you as a man. So that definition of rite of passage, that separation, transition, incorporation, that can be applied to a bunch of different areas in life: birth, rebirth, Christianity, different religions, when it comes to leaving your life behind before you subscribe to a particular religion, and then your life ahead within that religion. Marriage is another one. The marriage ceremony itself is almost a rite of passage where you have you're leaving behind your life as a single individual, and you are now looking ahead to the rest of your life in commitment to this one person as a married couple. And then now you're being reincorporated back into society as one individual, the two of you becoming one. So those are different ideas of rites of passage. But I'm specifically all about the rite of passage into manhood for boys.
That's awesome, bro.
Yes, sir.
Dude. Man, yeah, I've never heard you talk about the separation, initiation, incorporation myself. I haven't heard that, but I love that breakdown. And you're right. It plays into so many facets of life, right? As you were saying it, I was thinking like marriage and all these different things, right? And how you separate. So one of the things I want to get into with respect, you mentioned something about like your teenage years, right? And so you said that it has to be a father to kind of help with this transition, right? Because this is where you specialize in. You're talking to dads. You're specializing in talking to a lot of fathers and helping them along this journey to try to build this out. Because you look at our culture today. Normally, like my dad, right? I'll use my dad as an example. It's like, all right, his transition to manhood is like, let me buy him a car, right? Let me, he's an adult now, so the world tells us that we're adults at 18. So, that's when he's going to become a man. When he moves out on his own, that's when he's a man. When he, gets married or has sex for the first time, as culturally speaking, right? Has sex for the first time, then he's a man. So it's like we have all these skewed views of what it is to transition into manhood. So let's talk about the importance of why it needs to be a father that helps them go into that. And what does that transition actually look like?
All right. So it has to be the father right now because society as a whole is not doing it. It's not doing it properly. And all those things you mentioned, having sex for the first time, getting married, getting your first car, getting your driver's license, having your first beer, getting drunk for the first time, doing drugs, going to your first concert. Like all of these are just examples of what our culture and our society has attempted to replace a rite of passage with. And young boys these days, they're looking for something because they have physically changed into a man, having gone through puberty, but they don't understand what it all really means psychologically and what their future means as a man and what their responsibilities are as men. So they're looking for this internal sense of validation as a man, and they're turning to these different things like, okay, maybe if I do this, then I'll understand it. And this all occurs at a very deep subconscious level. And it's what I went through as a teenager. When I was 13, when I turned 13, society says you are a teenager now because the word 13 has teen in it, right? And that's actually a modern concept, by the way. So I was expecting something more like out of turning 13. My parents were great. They took me out to dinner. me and my twin brother, because we both turned 13 together. And I remember thinking to myself, this is it. I'm 13 now. Now what? Like I was rather disappointed. I didn't feel any different. Nothing changed at home. Nothing changed with the world that I knew. I wasn't looked at any differently. I was just called something different. I was a teenager, and I was rather disappointed. As I grew and I got my first job and sort of branched out into the world, so to speak, I went through a really dark time, several years of really not understanding what my life meant, really struggling with my identity and who I was. And it was a hard and dark time for me between the ages of about 16 and 19. And it was really God bringing me out of that through no initiation and through no desire of my own. Like I wanted to continue down this dark path, my own sinful desire. And God shone his light into my life and showed me that there was life to be had with him where I was. So that's what ended up bringing me out of that. And then I ended up pursuing law enforcement. So I look back on that dark period of my teenage years. Really, I always hindsight's 2020, of course, and I will caveat that my parents have been amazing parents my entire life. They've been together going on 35, 36 years now, and they raised us to the best of their ability. They were doing what they believed to be right.
Yeah.
And me and my siblings, we turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself. And so they did something right. But looking back on it, I believe that if there was a resource or some education my family, my parents, my dad could have received, I think it would have greatly benefited me during that time period. It would have given me some solid direction for my future and who I was as a man. And the rite of passage is that answer. The rite of passage is what can provide that direction, what can solidify the direction that the boy is headed in for his future as a man. Looking back, like I really could have used something like that. And obviously it wasn't meant to be, and I wouldn't be who I was today without all that.
Yeah.
Or on this path. But God has done everything in my life for a reason. Like I had to go through all that in order to have this perspective. And also God blessed me with 3 boys, and wanting them to have a better childhood, a better teenage time period than I did. That is a desire that he put on my heart because I have 3 boys. So all of that being said, that's what I look back on in my teenage years, is that I really could have benefited from a rite of passage like this.
Yeah, I often think about that with, regards to our parents, right? And the lack of information and exposure that they had, and kudos to them, of course, like they did with what they had, right? Like they did well with what they had. And that's how we turned out the way we turned out, right? But one of the things that I take note of is like we have like the benefit of the internet and all these books and Matt and Tim and like all these guys, right? That we can look up to, we can look to get this information, to get this exposure on. And at that time it was more like, man, if you just provide it, right, and you did your best, if you had food if you had food on the table, shelter over their heads, and like clothes on their back, like you're doing solid, like you're killing it as a dad, right? Like there was no thought of like, hey man, maybe I need a rite of passage, or maybe I need something like this, and I think also the culture, as like the advent of the internet and everything that we've been exposed to, the movies, right, everything, it's gotten to the point where now it's like it's really necessary now, right? Because there's so much information, there's so much
absolutely
like distractions out there, and with everybody like the world advocating for 127 different genders, like it was confusing when it was just 2, right?
Yeah.
It was just when we were trying to figure that out, and now you're gonna throw all this other nonsense into it, man. Like it's hard, bro, to navigate those teenage years.
Yeah, there's so much confusion in the world. Like there's so much questioning even of what is masculinity, what is being a man in today's society look like. And it's not an easy answer. So part of that solution is going back to ancient texts, going back to the Bible, using biblical principles to look and see, what does it mean to be a man? Well, it says right there that God gave Adam the mission to work the garden and to keep the garden. That's protecting, that's providing, that's leading. Like the direction is all right there. He gave Adam dominion, and that's our responsibility as men. And that definition has been lost and has been pushed back, I believe, by the enemy, has been pushed aside to what now the world's version, the society's version of what a man looks like. And the society's version of a man is not pretty. It's passive.
I would argue that it's very pretty.
Poor choice of words.
Yes,
but you're absolutely right. Yeah, the society's version of a man is a feminine man. And the Bible clearly gives us direction in what our masculinity is supposed to look like. And it's not feminine. He distinctly made women and females the way that they are to be beautiful, to be sought after and desired. But he made men different, and society has pushed for this equality, and that's just not how we are, how we're designed to be. We're designed to be distinctly men, distinctly women, and to work together in society the way that God designed us to work separately and together. So that's the direction that Voyage Rights is going with imparting these biblical principles of what it means to be a man through education and a rite of passage experience taken on by the father. Because if you leave it up to society, it's not going to be done right. It used to be in tribal situations. Rites of passage have been around for thousands of years, if I haven't mentioned that already. There's so much research out there, all these ancient tribal societies, even current tribal societies today, different religions, different countries, they have rites of passage experiences. But Western culture has not picked it up, has not had anything specific that signifies that moment where you have achieved manhood. So it falls to us fathers to bring that back and to take this on, because society is not going to do it. So with the absence of tribal culture, so to speak, well, we kind of still have some remnants of tribal culture when it comes to like different communities. Community is almost the modern day version of tribes. So you've got churches, you've got schools, you've got men's groups like Apogee.
So you heard Dan talking about the importance of tribes and community. This is something family leading men lack in their lives. They try to lone wolf their marriage, fatherhood, and even their business or career pursuits, thinking that they'll figure everything out on their own. I used to be like this until I plugged myself into an online community of good, solid men who I can turn to for support, encouragement, and solutions to some of my biggest problems. My marriage got stronger. I became a better father and even grew my business in the process. This changed my life so much that I decided to create an online community of my own called Alpha Dad Tribe. And if you're looking to improve your marriage, become a better father, and grow in your career or business, right now I'm offering a 7-day free trial for anyone that joins. You get to come in and meet me and the rest of the tribe of good men so we can help you become the leader your family deserves. Take advantage of this special offer by going to alphadadtribe.com. Once again, that's alphadadtribe.com. Looking forward to meeting you inside the tribe. Now let's get back to the show.
So when it comes to initiating, you have to be initiated into something. So being initiated into the type of manhood that your tribe, your community subscribes to is what it needs to be. So when you take on a rite of passage, yes, you can do it just you and your father, but you have to keep in mind, you as the father and your son, but you have to keep in mind, what type of manhood are you initiating them into?
So let's talk about the initiation phase. What does the actual work look like, right? Like, I know there's the separation of like, hey, we're putting back the boyhood, right? But there's certain actions and things that we have to do to actually go through that transformation. Similar to what you were saying, like you wouldn't have been able to transform into the man that you are today had you not gone through that kind of period between 16 and 19 where it was, troubled youth time. And, you had to go through those growing pains to become and to look back now and be like, okay, I get it. I get why God put me in that situation or allowed me to go through that, right? And come out stronger through that. So what does the initiation look like for, and I'm sure, different ages, right? It's different. But let's say, a dad listening right now, he has a young 8-year-old boy, right? What does that look like for him?
Yeah, great question. So you first have to factor in the age of your son. So society says a boy becomes a man at 18. You become an adult and you get certain privileges and, you can go out on your own more, what have you, as at the age of 18. So we have to take that into consideration. And there is truth that there is a developmental shift that occurs at age 18, but there's also shifts that occur at 8 years old, at 13, at 16, in addition to the age of 18. So these are key moments where you can take advantage of that developmental shift where the boy is growing and he's starting to change, whether he's gaining new perspective, his brain and his mind is growing, where he's noticing things he hasn't noticed before, whether that be women or he's starting to be interested in sex. Like, you have to take these moments and take advantage of them. So it depends on the age of your son. So at 8 years old, yeah, they're starting to gain more awareness, but they're still a child. They're still a boy. So a rite of passage at that age looks much, much, much more simpler than it does at age 16 or 18. So or 13 when they've completed puberty. So at 8, it's super simple. Like, hey, these are some very like basic differences between males and females, men and women. But I took my 8-year-old son on a rite of passage, and it was very simple. We just spent an entire day going on a hike. And it was a great location where we hiked at the halfway point. We sat down at a nice waterfall to have lunch. And I just had a good conversation with him. It was mostly me talking. And as with any 8-year-old, he's going to get distracted and he wants to play in the water and all that stuff.
Throwing rocks and stuff.
But it was good because I was able to say, like, look, you're 8 years old now. And this occurred like right at his birthday. So it was perfect. You're going to start seeing changes in your body. You're going to start noticing things as you get older. And that is because your boy body is going to grow into a man's body. And as a man, what does that entail? It means you're going to be a protector. It means you're going to be a provider and a leader. And sometimes you have to do hard things. And a lot of times you can choose whether or not to do those hard things. But sometimes as a man, it is our responsibility to take those things on and to lead our family through some times of struggle, through hard situations. And it was perfect because then I was able to turn around and say, now we got to hike uphill back to the car. This is one of those times where you don't have a choice. You have to do the hard thing. So it was perfect. We had a blast. And at the end, I gifted him his first pocket knife. I had it engraved with his name. He absolutely loved it. And it's been about 7 months now. And he still talks about that day in the woods, day hiking with his dad. So a lot of it is creating the intentional time, creating those moments so that you can utilize the power in those moments to set your son up with his future direction in the right direction.
Yeah.
So 8 years old, you got to keep it simple. But as he gets older and as the boy goes through puberty, he's really going to be pretty much lost. And I think this is a lot of where the adolescence angst comes from.
Yeah.
They're trying to push boundaries. They're trying to figure things out. They're trying to figure out their place in society now that they're a different human being, a different individual. So when it comes to that, you have to remove them from what they know. So I would not suggest doing a rite of passage like within your house, because that's where they live. They know what that is. It's nothing out of the normal for them. So you have to creating these special moments begin with removing them from what they know and putting them in a situation where it's the unknown for them. So
Gotcha.
Going out on a hike to a new trail they'd never been on before, going camping, renting a cabin on a lake, going on a trip, whether that be like San Diego or New York City, just someplace where they've never been before. And you could use that power in the unknown. So that's where it begins. But then as you dive deeper into the planning phases of a rite of passage, you have to set aside a space, and it's referred to as sacred space in the literature. And this sacred space is where the initiation can occur. So you make a big deal out of it, for lack of a better description. And one great way to do that is the removing of your shoes and socks. Like, you go into this sacred space as without shoes on, as barefoot. There's a book called Milestone to Manhood, and this father had great foresight and decades ago decided to start planning rites of passage for his sons. And then it ended up being a whole family situation where all the cousins went through a rite of passage themselves. And they would rent a cabin, and then they would have one person take off their shoes and enter the cabin. And then everybody on the outside would hand all their luggage and belongings to that person inside. And then they would each enter with no shoes on. And then they would stay inside the cabin for the rest of that night and the next morning with no shoes. And then they would do the process in reverse, exiting. So one person would exit, put their shoes on, and then they would hand that person the luggage, the belongings, and then they would depart that way. So creating this sacred space is very important because it's within that sacred space the initiation can occur. And this fulfills like a very deep psychological almost requirement subconsciously. So when you're in that sacred space, that's when you can go through any number of different ceremonial aspects, and it's up to the individual father on how he wants to plan it, but it needs to provide education to the son as to what his future looks like as a man, and bringing in other men is a huge part of this as well. So bringing in family members, and this is, with all this being said, this is for a father taking on this planning of a rite of passage just himself. He could bring in family members that the boy looks up to, and then they're going to impart wisdom to the boy, whether that's virtues, values, what they have struggled with in the past. One great thing that I did, I ran a rite of passage for my church just this last year, and we went around a circle at a fire, and we discussed values and virtues we lived by. And then I had all the boys write down those values and virtues. And then after we went around the circle, we went back around, and then we talked about the faults that we've struggled with, the different areas in our life where it hasn't been easy for us, and we've had to put in work to become better. And we wrote those down on a separate piece of paper. Then once we got through the circle, we ripped those pieces of paper out and we all burned them together. And it was making that commitment towards a better future, not just the boys by themselves, but all the men, all the fathers did as well. It was a powerful moment. And imparting that wisdom, having it occur within that sacred space, is part of that initiation process. And then having a special moment with your son where you're telling him, you're asking him if he's ready to commit to his future as a man. And that wording behind that can be different for each father. It's what the father thinks is right when it comes to that wording, but you're imparting that choice and that decision on him, and you're making it voluntary. So he has to choose to go into manhood. So you can represent that moment once he makes that decision, once he makes that choice. And you could represent that with a gift. I like to use t-shirts. It works out really well to give them. I go from a white t-shirt to a black t-shirt, and there's psychological significance to the colors. The book Iron John goes into that. Okay. And once they've received that, then you make that moment even more special. Give them a special gift. So the gift, it can be anything, but it has to have some sort of significance to it. So a family heirloom is a great idea that I saw work really, really well in the rite of passage I did for my church. It's been around for decades, maybe centuries, but now they are entrusted with that responsibility of keeping that and making sure that it stays safe for the rest of their life. And it's really a representation too of their future as a man, because they have to be responsible. They have to be responsible for themselves and those that they lead. So that's sort of like the ending of the initiation phase. And then you exit out of sacred space, and then there needs to be some sort of celebration, like bringing in the family members, bringing in the women and the children. And now they're all looking at this former boy, but now a man, differently. This is a great opportunity to put aside like childish nicknames, call them by their true name, their real name, giving them additional responsibilities, letting them take the car keys and go out. Like you have to extend that level of trust, because you just went through this whole process, this whole rite of passage, and now you say that they're a man. So now you have to treat them like it. So you have to trust it. You have to trust them. And often too, this is a great segue into the mother's role in all this. A mother needs to give the boy direction. That is their responsibility. As a boy, the mother is a primary nurturer. But once the boy goes through puberty and he's starting to develop into a man, that primary nurturing role shifts to the father. So the mother has to direct her son to his dad. And this is really, it's the very first thing that needs to happen in a rite of passage. Like the day before, the night before, the week before, the mother has to have one-on-one time with her son and say, you're at that age now where you need to look to your dad. You need to look, if you have problems, if you have issues, your dad's going to be the primary source of information and growth and knowledge for you, so that you can learn how to be a man. Because as a mother, as a woman, she does not have the ability or the knowledge and know-how to teach her son how to be a man. So it's very important that a mother understands that. It's very hard for a mother because mothers, they want to hold on to their children for as long as possible.
Nurture.
Yes, because it's so ingrained within them. But it's also very important for boys specifically to point them to their dad. So after the rite of passage, the boy or the boy that has become a man now, he's going to think there's going to be times where he's going to revert to a childish like behavior. He's going to turn to his mother to be coddled, for lack of a better term. And that's when the mother has to step in and say, no, you're a man now. Turn to your dad. And she has to continually direct him.
It's like reinforcing that idea, right? Like, and not
continually reinforcing that.
I love that. Yeah. So, okay, let's hang out here for a little bit on the mother topic.
Yeah.
Single moms, right? Get some single moms that watch the show or that listen to the show, and we get questions here and there as well from them. So how do they go about it, man? Dad's out of the picture, deadbeat dad, or maybe dad, passed away sooner than he should have, right? And all that, and like, right. So what does that look like for them? Are they seeking this out in a community form, like they're seeking other men, out? Like,
absolutely, yeah. So ideally, in a situation where the mother and the father aren't together anymore, there's still amicable relationship between the two, where the father can still be involved, still be there to nurture a boy into manhood.
Yeah.
But to be honest, like that's not often the case. Often the case, it's a man who has foregone his responsibilities to his family and he's left for whatever reason, or in the worst case scenario, he's passed away, unfortunately, under some sort of tragic circumstance. So there's a lot of boys in our society that don't have a present dad or an active dad in their life. So in that situation, it's really, really hard for the mother to raise their son to be a man. I really feel for these mothers because it is such a difficult task to take on. It nears the realm of impossibility because they're not a man. So I think, and this is no knock at all to single mothers in our world, in our society, but I think some of the feminization of our society has come from boys being raised into a quote unquote manhood by their mothers, like all the way through. And it's really been to our detriment. So as a single mother, what do you do? A single mother to a boy? Well, you get men involved in his life. And that could look like any number of ways, depending on your situation and your scenario. But there's scouting groups, there's church groups, even bringing in an uncle or a grandfather and just having a conversation with them saying like, hey, my boy, he's going to be growing into a man very soon, and he needs a consistent male presence in his life to take on that role that will initiate him and guide him into manhood. And making that ask of a man who is a grandfather or an uncle to a young boy like this, like I'll tell you, most men that I know will be more than happy to jump on this because it's ingrained within us to do that. Making that approach, it would be the first option. Now, if that's not an option to you, if you don't have any family, then you can look towards the church. The church is a great resource, depending on your location, that you can find a group of godly men who can assist with the role of nurturing your son as he grows into a man. And then there's nonprofits. There's plenty out there. There's a phenomenal one in Florida. One of our Apogee brothers involved in is called No Longer Fatherless. And they pair up men as mentors to mentees, these boys who don't have fathers in their life.
Like a Big Brother program type of thing.
For activities, mentorship, and it's a phenomenal program. So there's stuff out there. So digging in and doing the research and finding what's available to you is what needs to happen for your boy to be properly raised and initiated into manhood.
Yeah, that's such a good point, man. Yeah, and if you're a lady listening to this and you're in that situation, please, like, you take note of that there's a lot of men out there in your community, in your church, and in organizations, programs that are absolutely just wanting to pour in to other young men and other young boys to help them learn some of the lessons that we had to learn the hard way, right? Like we're so willing to do that. And we won't know that you need that help if you don't speak up, right?
Absolutely.
And we can offer and all that, but we don't know if that's going on if you don't speak up. And what I would encourage though is that you don't, because I've seen this too with some single moms, is like, well, they'll default to like, well, I figure everything else on my own, right? So I'm just going to figure this out on my own. And
right.
I know that there's a temptation to go there because, yeah, like you're a single mom and you're figuring things out on your own. I get it. You're working, you're doing everything. So you feel like you can do this as well. But I'm telling you, this is different. Mm-hmm. This is different. And we're seeing the effects of that with, the statistics, at least here in the West, here in America, like 50% divorce rates, right? And more fatherless homes. And we're seeing the effects of that. And even in public school, right? Like the majority, like I think it's like 70% or something like that are female teachers now. Like it's like it's a lot.
Yeah,
So
that lack of male influence is predominant in
absolutely,
our society.
Man. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So definitely just something to take note of, ladies, if you're listening to this, and fellas, if you have sisters that are in a single mom situation or family members, like let them know. Send this podcast to them. Like let them know that there's options out there for them. And to seek those out, you step in and be that mentor to the young men as well. So, yeah, man, great points.
Yeah,
I love it.
Our society needs men to step up.
Yeah,
and that's 100% true. And it's possible to take on a rite of passage for the boys within your community, and that's something that we're working on too with Voyage Rights. Is that the rite of passage I did for my church? It's actually a culmination where I brought those boys and their fathers together through education. What does it look like to be a man as prescribed in the Bible? And then what does it look like to be a man in today's society? How does it look like to push back against the culture that says we need to be a feminine man? And then what is our responsibilities when it comes to protecting God's woman? And then what daily habits should we pursue to become the men that we need to be? So all of that was a curriculum that we went through, and then we culminated in a powerful rite of passage experience. And this year, that's part of what we're accelerating is we're going to push that curriculum and training on properly hosting a rite of passage for your community. We're pushing that out to organizations nationwide this year, this very summer. So if you want to step up as a man and you feel like our society is headed in the wrong direction, then it's your responsibility. If you're having those thoughts, it's your responsibility now to be the man that steps up, to be the man that's going to run the boys in your community through a rite of passage. You can reach the fathers. The most powerful thing that I saw, notwithstanding the actual initiation into manhood, the most powerful thing about the whole experience was that the fathers, they were ready and waiting for somebody to ask them to do this. They were ready and willing. Everything I asked of them through the rite of passage, I had them write letters. I had them come up with gifts. No questions asked. They were like, yep. And then they crushed it. They absolutely crushed it.
That's
so
awesome.
Fathers out there, they don't know what they don't know. And I think so much of it is they're waiting to be called into waiting for their intentionality to be called up. So fathers out there need this. And then there are men that need to take this on for their communities. And that's how we're going to get as many boys through a rite of passage as possible, is reaching their communities. So that curriculum is called Making Mighty Men. It's coming this summer. Absolutely pumped to be running that because we saw so much great success in that over this past fall. We're doing another whole group for that at my church now, Freedom Church in Stafford, Virginia. And it's just a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, I love it, brother. All right, man. I want to be respectful of your time. We're coming up here. I can't believe it's already almost been an hour, which is crazy. But I want to hit you, man, with this last question that I usually hit my guests with. And it's, In your opinion, right? If you had to narrow it down to a few traits, what makes a dad a good family leader?
Definitely holding himself to a standard. And it's more than just having a standard and a code to live by, because anybody can say that they have a standard, but it's actually living that standard daily and doing the daily work is what you need to have, is what you need to be doing to properly lead your family. You and I both know what that means. And it is represented right behind me by my axe. Powerful moment and experience that we had together.
Yeah.
And that's really what it all boils down to, is you know what you need to do. So now you have to do it daily. You have to put in that work. And it's not easy, but that's why you need to have a tribe of brothers that support you. And it's incredibly important.
Yeah. Love that, man. Love that, holding the standard. That's we definitely know what that's like. All right, man. Well, before we end up, man, where can we go to support you, man? What are the socials? What's everything? What do you got going on? I know you have a workshop coming up, but I don't think this will be released before that workshop. But I'm sure you're going to have more.
Yep.
So if you can let us know.
The good thing is that with the workshop, it's a rite of passage workshop. We're diving into a lot of what we just discussed. What is a rite of passage? What are the key elements that you need to include? How are you going to go about planning this for your son? And so that we're doing 2 workshops this month in the month of January 2025, and then we'll have 2 more in March. So if you jump on our socials, Voyage Rights on Instagram, Facebook, X, we're up on all of those where we share the latest updates. The website, voyagerights.com, we've got 2 programs. They're just downloadable PDFs. Those are available now if your son is 8 years old or 13 years old or within those age ranges. You can get on there now. You can download a guide, and it has everything that you need in there on what you need to do to plan a rite of passage for your son. So those are available right now. Anybody can go on the website and snag one of those. If you want to support by buying some merchandise, we've got hats and t-shirts and all that good stuff. That's up there too. All that gets wrapped right back into the business and keeping things going here. So all of that, much appreciated. Any follow, any share, any like. We're about this year really ramping up the marketing and getting the word out that rites of passage are what need to come back to our society for the direction that our society needs to go. So really, really excited. The Making Mighty Men curriculum for any organization, that's going to be coming in the summer. We're going to have monthly information sessions coming up. Look for, I don't know when this podcast will go out, but we're making an announcement next week on an information session. And then we're going to do one every single month for anybody who's interested in taking that on for their organization. So super pumped about everything that's going on with Voyage Rights this year. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be phenomenal. Cannot wait.
Sounds amazing, bro. I love it, man. I love watching the growth, dude, because I've seen it from like the inception, right, till now. It's awesome, brother. So yeah, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show, bro. Yeah.
Thank you, man. And everything that you've been doing with your podcast, with your tribe, it's phenomenal. It's been awesome to watch your growth from when we joined Apogee together a couple of years ago. And it's just been phenomenal getting to know you and the heart that you have in reaching men. That's the power that I see in you. So
appreciate that.
We're really excited as our journey together continues and as we keep building out what we're building out, because our world needs it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, man. And speaking of community, you have a community that you're building out too.
Yep.
Is that something? Are you inviting people openly right now, or is
yes?
Okay,
at
cool.
any time. If any father wants to join our community, we're on the school platform. It's called the Voyagers, and inside the community, you're going to find regular support in building out your rite of passage experience with other fathers who are doing the same. So, and there's exclusive offerings within that community as well. So if you're interested in that, it's an easy search on the school platform, SKOOL, the Voyagers. I think I was able to change the URL to school.com/the Voyagers. So
nice.
Try that out. If it doesn't work, you can find it pretty easily. But yeah, it's been phenomenal having that. We do monthly Q&A calls too, and then whatever support you need to launch a rite of passage experience for your son.
Yeah, and I'm going to link all that stuff in there for you guys as well in the show notes. So everything will be there, man. So, dude, again, appreciate you so much, brother. We'll be catching up here soon because I'm gonna be joining that workshop on that you got coming up. So, all right, brother. Love you, man. Thank you.
1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9 the thought of being emotionless started taking over my mind.